Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I felt like I needed to post this video a little bit quicker than next week. I'm getting problems or your homework back in from the class, from the factoring polynomials and finding real zeros worksheet. But what I'm finding is that you are factoring but not finding the real zeros. So let's look at the difference for just a couple minutes from factoring to finding real zeros. So if we're at class, we would have played a game to practice this, and then you would have been great with it. Period 3 would have wanted me to play Zap, and I probably wouldn't have wanted to play with period 6 because markers probably would have been thrown across the room. All right, so anyway, I can't do that with you, so we can do our best. I'll try, email me questions. So what I have for you right now is looking at the difference if I asked you to factor versus finding real zeros by factoring. So if I asked you to factor, so let's take something that is factorable. Let's go x to the fourth minus 49. Okay, x to the fourth minus 49 is a perfect square. So we can factor by difference of squares. So we can separate two parentheses, and we know it's x squared minus 7 and x squared plus 7. Okay, that would be it. You factored it. You check to see if this is a perfect square. It's not, so you're completely good. So if then on this side I asked you to find the real zeros by factoring, so what I would see is I would see my directions. I want the zeros. So think about from when we did our quadratic unit. What's another name from zeros? It's the x-intercepts. So the solutions. What makes the factor equal to 0? So I take my problem, I approach it the same way. I set up my factors. I already know what my two factors are. Okay. Oh, I had a little visitor. That's actually kind of fun. Anyway, so then I would take my factors, set it equal to 0, and figure out my solutions. So for this one, so I might set my factor equal to 0, and then solve. I have a quadratic. So when we did our quadratic unit, probably the easiest way to solve this is by square roots. So add the 7 to both sides, and then undo that by taking the square root. And when we took the square root, remember we had a positive and negative, square root of 7. And then on the other side, if I take x squared plus 7 equal to 0, I still get rid of the plus 7 by subtracting it. When I take the square root, what's the square root of a negative? Okay, remember it doesn't exist from our last video, it's imaginary. So you would write plus or minus I root 7, but I remember I just said I only want the real solutions, so I do not need this, I only want the real. So let's check one more quick one at what the difference of factoring versus finding real zeros. Okay, let's factor one by grouping. So we have x cubed, let's go minus 5x squared plus 2x minus 10. Okay, so I'm asked to factor this. So I group my first two, my second two. In common would be an x squared for my first group. What I would take out would be a positive 2, what they would have in common. And I could either, you could think of it, I can factor out the x minus 5, or I could put it in reverse FOIL, because what's getting multiplied by x minus 5? The x squared and the 2. Okay, that's my factors. So if I asked to factor, that's what you do, you'd stop. If I would ask to find the real zeros, we already know the factors, so let's just write out that part. But this time I'm going to say equals to 0. So I know my factors are x squared plus 2 and x minus 5 equal to 0. So let's set each factor equal to 0. So here, what do we do to get x by itself? We just have to add 5. And we get x is 5. Okay, again on this one, subtract 2, we get negative 2. What's the square root of a negative? Okay, it's imaginary. So this one only has one real solution. It comes from the linear factor of x minus 5. If it's a plus with a squared, that is going to be an imaginary solution. Okay, so when I ask you to factor, you stop here. When I ask you to find the zeros, you set each factor equal to 0 and then state the solutions. So make sure you read the directions carefully. Some of you have already submitted homework, and I'm asking you to please go back and fix that and get me the solutions. All right, have a nice weekend. See you on Monday.